Going into 2018, right, it won't be CNN covering the Wisconsin governor's race in a way, or MSNBC that'll influence it, or Fox News. So the 5 right-wing talk shows in Milwaukee, and then there's another one that's popular in Green Bay and Wausau, Jerry Bader. But they regularly, and the media has written stories about this, take credit for Scott Walker, say that they are the background of the Walker movement. And so if Walker is not in the cabinet and is running for re-election in 2018, how much credence do you give to that? And how do you fight back, given that what we really have here is the public airwaves? We have the 2 dominant AM stations, news stations in Milwaukee, not only having only one point of view, but essentially degenerating into get out the vote efforts, essentially. They build up the issue, build up the emotion, build up a narrative, and then go all out with sensational narratives at the end to try to maximize turnout in the OW counties or the WOW counties surrounding us. So how much credence do either of you give to the power that a lot of other media that's looked at it thinks, and right-wing radio here claims for itself, in impacting Wisconsin governor's races?
Well, I always believe people when they say things. No, it's weird. I know that we talk about lies and dishonesty, but generally when people are bragging about something, you probably ought to believe them, that they at least sincerely believe it themselves. And you know, you talk about gubernatorial races. I would note, you know, Glenn Grothman is a congressman from Wisconsin. And people are offering their insights on Mr. Grothman. Glenn Grothman is a congressman from Wisconsin. He was in a multi-candidate primary, and there's an awfully lot of evidence that that the enthusiasm for Mr. Grothman on our broadcast airwaves was beneficial to his candidacy. I think that Ron Johnson might also have benefited just a wee bit from some of this. So, look, we were founded, this country was founded on the premise that we ought to have a lot of voices out there. At the founding of the American experiment, they let you mail newspapers of all the different views for almost nothing. It was essentially free. And they actually had subsidies to make sure that you had dissenting voices and challenging. The founders of this country absolutely knew that you needed to have information, and they were not unrealistic. They didn't think it was just going to come, that it would be always fair and balanced. So their model was to grow it, not to narrow it. Their theory was, you know, make sure that you've got a lot of voices with a lot of platforms and you can have a real discourse. You can have right-wing voices in there. You can have left-wing voices in there. In a fair and functional society, you would have libertarian voices in there, and you would have socialist voices in there. When Bernie Sanders got ready to run for president, everybody said, well, he's going nowhere because he's a democratic socialist, and we never talk about that on TV, so he couldn't possibly have any appeal whatsoever. And what did Bernie Sanders go out and do? He did super rallies with hundreds of thousands of people. They all showed up, and they voted for him, an awful lot of them. And so the fact of the matter was you had a real-time test of whether ideas that don't get reflected in our major media might, if they're put out there, get real traction. Frankly, the libertarians had their best result ever this year with a guy who's still trying to find Aleppo. And so right. we as a people crave diverse and open discourse. Now, when we created the radio airwaves in this country, when we had the development of our radio systems in this country, it was happening actually at a time when in Europe, control of the airwaves had begun to frighten people, right? You looked over and you said, wow, that's not good to have kind of one-size-fits-all media on the left or the right. We want to make sure that we have diversity. So we used to have a lot of rules in this country to assure that we had all sorts of different ownership, that nobody got too big, and that you sort of won on the basis of the quality of your ideas, not the structural advantages that were created. That was blown apart by the Telecommunications Act of 1996, an act supported by Republicans in Congress and signed by a Democratic president, Bill Clinton. And that did profound damage because it made it easier to buy up radio stations, to go with a shout rather than a discourse. And when you combine that with the decision in the late 1980s to eliminate the fairness doctrine, you end up in a situation where, yeah, I mean, it is almost logical to be promoting candidates and ideas, and that is not antithetical to America. There were newspapers at the founding that were so partisan you couldn't imagine it.
Yep.
But our problem is we haven't started to address this crisis, right? To address the situation of bigness and of shouting over discourse and of all this. We haven't started to think about how do we get a system that actually does achieve what the founders hoped for when they talked about freedom of the press. And the answer to that is to guard against concentration and consolidation of media, to guard against bigness, for a long time I was troubled by it. I now favor the restoration of the fairness doctrine. I think it just becomes a necessary reality. But I don't think it's a cure-all. But the final thing is, this is the final thing. It's the most important thing of all. We're not stupid people. We have critiques of multinational corporations in our trade policy, in the military-industrial complex, in education and privatization, so many different areas. Why wouldn't we have a critique of corporate control of media? Not merely because we like a corporation or dislike it, but because if it's all about making a fortune, isn't there a very good possibility that that pursuit of the fortune, a pursuit of immense wealth, will degenerate rather than raise things up? And so, because we don't have a functional public broadcasting system in this country, we've got good public radio in Wisconsin, we've got some good things nationally, but we don't compare to other countries in the size and the depth of it. Good public radio raises up the standard of everything else because it's so strong and it's so information and news oriented. We don't have enough of it. I like a lot of what we have, but we don't have enough of it. Simple answer. This isn't complicated. If you've got a problem and it's causing results that are damaging to you and your society, if you're a functional human being, you unite with other functional human beings, you form a co-op, or you form a coalition, or you form a group and you put a few dollars forward, and when your dollars come together, you find a place on those airwaves or in this whole new digital universe, and you create something that is of a quality and a standard that informs and makes functional our democracy. The power is with you. I wish we had better structures, but there's still room within our structures for you people in this room to lead us out of the wilderness.
Yeah. And we're going to go to Q&A, but I would just say one way to see part of the Radioactive Project is to use committee organizing and pressure to create our own fairness doctrine here in Milwaukee without having the federal laws. We can do it. We can hold these media companies accountable, but then we need to own our own media as well.
I think those are both parts of it.
And Mary are saying, and it's a two-pronged strategy.